You.
Walk with me. Mayumi.
I don't know you. What is this?
My name.
Amara.
She was not supposed to be there. Not in that church. Not in that ivory-draped ballroom where Seoul's most powerful bloodlines gathered like wolves in silk. Not standing at the altar's edge, clutching a manila envelope that could destroy every single man in that room. And yet, there she was. Amara Osie, Nigerian-born, London-trained, and breathtakingly unbothered, stood in a blood-red dress among a sea of white guests, her dark skin glowing like polished obsidian under crystal chandeliers. Yet, her chin was raised, her eyes were unafraid. The groom had stopped mid-vow, the room had gone silent. And the man at the back, the one everyone feared, the one no one dared name above a whisper, had risen slowly from his chair. His jaw was tight. His eyes were fixed entirely on her, not with rage, with something far more dangerous. Because in 7 years of running Seoul's most untouchable empire, Kang Yi-hyun had never once been caught off guard. Until now. Until her. Welcome to Afro-Korean love drama. Please like, share, and subscribe. The envelope had cost Amara everything to obtain. 3 months of undercover work. 1 broken engagement back in Lagos. A forged press credential. 2 bribed hotel concierges, and a near-death experience in a parking garage near Gangnam at 2 in the morning. But she had it now. Photographs, wire transfers, shell company records, all pointing to one truth, that the man standing at the altar, Grumatubi Choi Tuen, heir to the Choi pharmaceutical empire, had been laundering cartel money through his fiancée's family foundation for 4 years. Amara was not here to destroy the wedding. She was here to deliver the evidence to the one person who could use it, the bride's father, Minister Yoon, who had no idea his daughter was about to marry a criminal. Simple. Clean. In and out. Except no plan survived contact with Kang Yi-hyun. The first time she saw him, she almost missed him entirely. He was seated 3 rows from the back, dressed in a charcoal suit so precisely tailored it looked painted on. No tie. Top button undone. Dark hair swept back. A jaw, carved from something colder than marble. And eyes sharp, heavy-lidded, black as a winter sea, that were not watching the altar at all. They were watching her. Amara had noticed him the way you notice a storm before it arrives. A shift in pressure. A drop in temperature. The particular stillness of a predator who has decided to be patient. She had looked away first. A mistake, she would later realize. Because Kang Yi-hyun never forgot a face that looked away from him first. She had been moving along the far wall, angling toward Minister Yoon's table at the front, when the groom glanced up mid-recitation and froze. He knew her. Amara saw it in the exact millisecond. His face went white beneath the camera lights. Choi Tuan's eyes dropped to the envelope in her hand, and something like terror crossed his perfectly sculpted face. You... The officiant blinked. The bride turned. 300 guests swiveled in their seats. And in the chaos of that single fractured moment, Amara kept walking. She placed the envelope on Minister Yoon's table, met his confused eyes, and said simply, "Open it after the ceremony, sir, or before. Your choice." Then she turned to leave. She had almost made it to the doors. Almost. A hand closed around her wrist. Not rough, not shaking, just immovable, like a lock clicking shut. She turned slowly. Kang Yi-hyun stood behind her, his expression unreadable, his black eyes moving over her face with a precision that felt surgical. Up close, he was taller than she'd estimated, broader, the kind of man who occupied space differently from everyone else, like gravity bent slightly toward him. "Walk with me," he said. Quiet. It was not a question. Amara looked down at his hand on her wrist. then back up at his face. "I don't know you," she said. Something shifted in his expression. The ghost of something surprise, maybe, or amusement crossed his features and vanished in less than a second. "You will," he said. She pulled her wrist free. Or rather, he let her pull it free. There was a difference, and they both knew it. "I'm leaving," she said. "The exits are cut." His voice did not rise. It never had to. "Two in's men. 4 at the doors, 2 in the lot. They recognized you the moment you walked in." A pose. "I have a car. The choice is yours." Amara studied him for 3 full seconds. Then she smiled, slow and unbothered and just slightly devastating, and said, "Interesting. Is that a threat or an invitation?" His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Both," he said. She got in his car. Not because she was afraid she had been afraid before, had learned early that fear was only useful when it moved your feet. There. She got in because the math was simple. 4 armed men who worked for a criminal groom, or 1 unknown quantity in a suit that cost more than her monthly rent. Unknown quantities, in her experience, were more negotiable. The car was a black Genesis, GV90, armored, she suspected, by the way it sat too low for its suspension. The driver did not speak. Tinted partition. The interior smelled of leather, and something cool and expensive she couldn't name. Kang Yi-hyun sat on the opposite end of the back seat, arms loosely folded, watching the city scroll past his window. Seoul at dusk was all neon and scaffolding, and the distant glitter of the Han River. He had not looked at her since the doors closed. "Who sent you?" he asked. "No one," she said. A beat. "That envelope is already delivered," she said. "Whatever you're worried about, it's too late." He turned his head then, and the full weight of his attention was something almost physical. She held it. "I'm not worried," he said. "Then why did you stop me?" Ah, silence. Long enough that the city lights changed 3 times. "Because," he said slowly, "you walked into a room full of dangerous men in a red dress carrying enough evidence to start a war, and you looked like you were going for a Sunday stroll." He paused. "I wanted to know why." Amara looked at him. "Because I'm not afraid of dangerous men," she said simply. Something flickered behind his eyes. Something she would not be able to name for a long time. "You should be afraid of me," he said. "Quiet." Almost jet. She tilted her head. And then, in the warm dark of his armored car, she smiled at him the same smile she had offered at the door of the church, and said, "I never beg, and I never flinch. So if you're planning to threaten me, Mr. Kang," he said. "Mr. Kang, do it quickly. I have a flight to catch." He did not threaten. He told the driver to take her to Incheon Airport. He also, without a word of explanation, placed his business card on the leather seat between them and looked back out the window. She left the card. He did not look surprised. But when the car door closed behind her and he watched her walk straight-backed, unhurried, rolling a small carry-on she'd apparently had waiting at a luggage locker, he picked the card back up himself. And for the first time in a very long time, Kang Yi-hyun sat in the dark and thought about someone who was not his empire. 3 weeks later, London. Amara had gone back to her life. Her flat in Brixton, the 2nd floor of a narrow Georgian terrace with loud pipes and excellent natural light. Her desk was covered in case files and cold coffee. Her editor at the Global Dispatch called twice a day about the Choi story, which had exploded across Korean financial news within 48 hours of the wedding. Minister Yoon had not opened the envelope before the ceremony. He had opened it during the reception. The wedding had ended in a quiet, devastating removal. No arrests, not yet, but Choi Tuan had left the country by Monday morning, and his name was now the headline on 3 separate government investigations in Seoul, Tokyo, and Frankfurt. Amara had submitted her story anonymously, as agreed. She had expected that to be the end of it. She had not expected the package. It arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a courier in a black uniform who spoke only to confirm her name and pressed a fingerprint-locked titanium case into her hands. Inside, a new phone encrypted, a note, handwritten, in Korean she had to photograph and translate. The men who knew your face at that wedding, 4 of them are looking for you. The envelope you delivered contained one document that was never meant to leave Korea. You are in possession of information that makes you a target. If you want to stay alive, contact me. If you choose not to, I will find you anyway. This is not a threat. It is a fact. Kay Amara read it twice. Then she poured herself a glass of water, sat at her kitchen table, and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. He found her a drink. In 3 weeks, with nothing but her face. She should have been alarmed. Instead, she found herself thinking about the precise steadiness of his voice in that car. The way he hadn't tried to take the phone from her or demand the envelope back. The way he had put the card down in the space between them and not pressed. She picked up the encrypted phone. She turned it on. And she typed, "How many are there? And where are they now?" The reply came in under 30 seconds. 4, 1 in London. He's been outside your building since yesterday morning. Amara stood up, walked to her window, and looked down without moving the curtain. A man in a gray jacket, coffee in hand, pretending to read on his phone. She typed, "He's sloppy." Then, "He's gone." She looked up. The man was walking away, unhurried, into the October crowd, as though something had been communicated to him that she could not hear. She typed, "How?" His reply, "I have a man on your street. Has been there since the night of the wedding." Amara sat down slowly. "That was 3 weeks ago," she typed. She stared at that single syllable for a long moment. Then she typed, "Why?" The reply took longer this time. Long enough that she wondered if he would answer at all. "I told you. You walked into that room like you weren't afraid. I needed to know if that was courage or foolishness." She typed. His answer came in 2 words. Still deciding. 5 days later, Seoul. She went back because the story required it, she told herself. Choi Tunay had surfaced in Singapore. His financiers had retained lawyers in Seoul. The government investigation had stalled, and her editor believed correctly that someone powerful was applying pressure from within the prosecution. She needed sources inside Korea. She told herself that was the only reason she booked the flight. She did not examine why she messaged Kang Ye-hyun before she landed, rather than after. He met her at Gimpo Airport in the same black Genesis. Different suit, deep navy this time, no less precise. He was leaning against the car when she came through arrivals, hands in his pockets, and something about the particular stillness of him, the absence of performance, struck her again the way it had in the church. Most powerful men she had interviewed performed their power constantly. They filled rooms with noise and presence and deliberate dominance. This one was as if he had nothing to prove and nowhere he'd rather be. "The story brought me," she said. A pause that was just long enough to mean something. "Ah." He took her to a restaurant that had no sign, no menu, and apparently no other customers. A private room overlooking the river. A chef who cooked without being asked. Amara ate carefully, watched him do the same, and said nothing for the first several minutes, because she was teaching him the way he held his chopsticks, the way he looked at the river between their exchanges, the precise, unhurried way he poured her water before she asked. "Who are you exactly?" she said finally. "I didn't search for a source before the first interview. Biases the questions." "Kang Ye-hyun, third son of the Kang Group chairman. I don't run Kang Group. I run the part of things that Kang Group cannot officially acknowledge." Then, with something close to honesty, was laundering money through my competitors' shell networks. He did not have permission. The temperature in his voice dropped precisely 2 degrees. What he did without my knowledge, using my city. That offends me. You're not worried about the investigation. I run the investigation, he said simply. Or I did, until someone applied pressure from the prosecution's fourth floor, which is why I need your story published before Friday. You didn't save me because you were impressed by my red dress, she said. Something careful shifted behind his expression. You need a journalist who already has the evidence and can't be traced back to you. He was quiet for a beat too long. And no. The and no landed differently. Tell me about the fourth floor, she said. Later that night, it began to rain in Seoul. The real kind, cold, relentless October rain that drove people indoors and turned the Han River silver and reduced the city to blurred light and rushing sound. Amara and Kang Yi-hyun stood under the awning of the restaurant while his driver circled the block, neither of them yet willing to break the conversation that had stretched, somehow, from strategy to something else entirely over the last 3 hours. He had not laughed, but he had watched her laugh in a way she felt, without seeing. That particular intense quality of his attention that made her aware of herself in her own skin. Ask me the other thing, she said, without looking at him. The thing you've been not asking for the last 40 minutes. He was quiet for a moment. I.e. You could have sold that evidence. Name your price. My father was a journalist, she said. In Accra. He spent 20 years chasing a story about military contracts and disappeared before he could publish it. The story came out eventually. Different journalist. 3 years later. My father missed it. So I finish what he started. Every story that matters, every envelope that gets delivered, I finish it. The silence that followed was not empty. She felt him shift slightly beside her, not moving closer, exactly, just toward her, as though something in him had pivoted. I'm sorry, he said. Now I'm sorry for your loss. Not the reflexive performance of sympathy. Nai ka. Just 2 words, direct and quiet and real. She looked at him. He was looking at her already. The rain ran off the awning's edge in a silver curtain between them and the city. The night smelled of wet stone and something warm from the kitchen behind them. They were standing closer than they had been at the start of the evening how that had happened. Neither of them could have explained precisely. His driver appeared at the curb. Neither of them moved immediately.
Friday, she said. Friday, he confirmed.
She stepped out from under the awning into the rain, and he caught her wrist not to stop her, she realized immediately, just for a second. Just long enough for her to look back. Her name in his mouth, for the first time. Like he was tasting the weight of it. She looked at his hand on her wrist, the same way she had in the church. He released it. She walked to the car. He stood under the awning and watched until she was out of sight. The next morning, Amara threw herself into work. She had the files, the wire transfers, the shell company documentation. She had Yi-hyun's intel on the prosecution pressure names, dates, a recorded phone call she could not yet legally use but could build toward. She had 3 sources inside the Choi family's accounting firm who were now very willing to talk. She worked from a hotel room in Yangsan, the kind of hotel whose Wi-Fi was fast and whose concierge asked no questions. She worked in 15-hour blocks, breaking only to eat and to exchange tersely efficient messages with Yi-hyun about which sources were safe and which had gone dark. It was, she told herself, a professional arrangement. It was not her fault that he messaged her at 11 p.m. to ask if she'd eaten, or that she found herself answering honestly, or that their exchanges, meant to be purely tactical, kept drifting 20 minutes at a time into other things, her childhood in Lagos, his grandmother in Busan who had raised him after his mother left, the particular loneliness, they discovered, of people who had always been too perceptive and too careful to trust easily. You would have made a good strategist, he wrote one night. You would have made a decent journalist, she replied. You notice everything. A pause. Then, I notice you. She stared at that for a long moment. Then she put her phone face down and went back to her draft. 3 days before publication, the threats began. The first was a message through her global dispatch editor. A legal team representing Choi Tun's family had filed a preemptive injunction against publication in a British court. The second was a note slid under her hotel room door, unmarked, just 4 words: "Stop now. Go home." The third was the man who followed her from the hotel lobby to a cafe 2 blocks away and sat 3 tables back, watching. She photographed him without appearing to, sent the image to Yi-hyun at 9:17 a.m. and ordered her coffee. His reply arrived before her cup did. "I see him. Don't leave the cafe." 22 minutes later, the man was gone. Yi-hyun arrived 11 minutes after that, sat down across from her, and said nothing for a moment, just looked at her face with an intensity she was learning to read. "You're not scared," he said. "I am, actually," she said. "I'm just not useful when I'm scared, so I file it." He looked at her for a long beat. "File it where?" "For later. For when the story's done." She picked up her cup. "Then I go home and I fall apart in private and no one watches." Something in his expression shifted fine and precise as a crack in glass, not visible unless you were looking for it. "I'd like to be there," he said quietly, "when you fall apart." The air between them went very still. I know what it is," he said, simply, not apologizing for it, not retreating. "I know you're here to finish your story. I know I'm complicated, and I know what I run, and I know you're the last person who should be trusting me." A pause. "I'm telling you anyway." Amara set down her cup. She did not speak for a long moment. "You're right," she said finally. "You're complicated." "Yes, and dangerous. Extremely. And I don't trust easily." "Neither do I," he said. And yet, she agreed, quietly. They sat in the hum of the cafe in the gray soul morning, and nothing was resolved, and somehow that was fine. 2 days before publication, someone leaked her identity to a Korean tabloid. By noon, her photograph was circulating on 3 platforms. Nigerian journalist behind Choi wedding scandal, hired by rival Keeble to destroy family. By 3 p.m., her hotel address had been posted to an anonymous board. By 6 p.m., she had 3 missed calls from her editor, 2 from her mother in Lagos, and a message from Yi-hyun that contained only an address and a departure time. She packed in 11 minutes. His apartment was on the 42nd floor of a building in Mapo that looked like glass and intention. Floor-to-ceiling window, the city spread below like a circuit board. Minimal, precise, expensive in the way of things that required no display. A home that had been assembled by someone who knew exactly what they wanted and had never needed to perform it for anyone else. Amara stood at the windows while he called someone in rapid Korean, his voice low and controlled. She caught fragments. Location confirmed. 4 points. Media blackout. The voice of a man who was accustomed to crises. When he hung up, she spoke without turning around. "I won't hide the story." "I know," he said. "And I won't let you publish it under your network. It needs to come from the dispatch, independent, verified." "I know that too." He moved to stand beside her at the window. Not crowding her, just present. "I've already spoken to your editor. The injunction will be dissolved by tomorrow morning. I've made certain arrangements." She turned. "What kind of arrangements?" "Legal ones. Oppose. And 1 phone call to a very senior man in the British judiciary who owes me a very old favor. Nothing that touches your editorial independence." She searched his face. "You did that for the story," she said. He looked at her. "I did that for you," he said. She stayed, not permanently, not carelessly. She stayed in the apartment's 2nd bedroom with the city below her and the door between their rooms closed, and she worked until 2 in the morning while he worked in the main room, and they passed each other in the kitchen at midnight, she with her cold coffee, he with a glass of water, and said nothing, and somehow the silence was not uncomfortable. It felt, disturbingly, like something she had been doing for years. She told herself that was the exhaustion talking. She went back to her room and worked until 3. The following morning, Amara woke to the sound of rain again, softer this time, the kind that turned the windows translucent and the city to watercolor and to the smell of food. She found Yi Hyun in the kitchen, tie loosened, sleeves rolled to the elbow, making eggs with the focused efficiency of a man who applied the same quality of attention to everything he touched. He looked up when she appeared. "Sit," he said. "You cook," she said. "My grandmother taught me. She said a man who cannot feed himself cannot be trusted with anything else." He placed a plate in front of her. Simple eggs, rice, the kind of radish side dish that smelled of fermentation and memory. She was usually right. Amara sat and ate, and tried not to notice how domestic this was, and failed completely. The injunction was dissolved at 6 a.m., he said, returning to his own plate. "Your editor has the final files. She can publish as soon as you approve. I'll review it after breakfast." He nodded. They ate in the quiet of the rain. "Tell me about your grandmother," Amara said, not planning to. He paused, a small, private pause. Then he told her, not a lot. Not the curated performance of a man managing his image. Just fragments: a small house in Busan, a woman who smelled of doenjang and kept a photograph of Yi Hyun's mother under her mattress and never explained why. A boy who had decided very early that love was something you demonstrated through action rather than announced in words, because the people in his life who announced it loudest were always the ones who left. Amara listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "She sounds extraordinary." "She was," he said. "She died 3 years ago. Appose. I built this building in her name. The deed is in her name." Amara looked at him. He was looking at his plate. "I'd like to be there," he had said yesterday, "when you fall apart." She understood, now, what he meant by that. Not performance, not possession. The kind of presence that shows up at 2 a.m. and makes eggs and does not require you to explain yourself. The kind she had not let herself want in a very long time. That afternoon, she approved the final draft. The story went live at 4 p.m. Seoul time, and within the hour, it had been picked up by Reuters, the Financial Times, and 3 Korean news agencies. By evening, the Choi family's lawyers had issued a statement. By nightfall, the Seoul prosecution had reopened the investigation under a new lead prosecutor. One, Yi Hyun confirmed quietly, who was not for sale. Her editor called, delirious. Her mother called, confused but proud. Amara sat on the floor of the apartment's living room with her back against the sofa and let herself, finally, feel the weight of what she had carried for 3 months. Not tears. Not quite, but something adjacent. The decompression of a person who had been braced for impact and was now, suddenly, allowed to breathe. She heard Ye Hyun come out of the study. She didn't move. He came and sat beside her on the floor, his shoulder close but not touching, and said nothing. They watched the city lights come on below them, one by one, as the rain continued and Seoul turned gold in the dark. "I finish stories," she said, "and then I go home." "I know," he said. "I have a flat in Brixton with loud pipes and very good light." "I know," he said again. A silence. "I don't want you to go," he said. Quiet. The way he said everything, not performing, not managing, just stating a fact that was apparently more than he usually offered anyone. She looked at her hands. "Yi Hyun." "I know," he said, for the 3rd time. Softer. "I know what I am. I know the gap between what I run and what you stand for. I'm not asking you to close it. I'm just—" He paused. "Being honest with you, because you seem like the kind of person who prefers honesty to management." Amara looked at him. He was looking straight ahead at the city, jaw set, the particular careful stillness of a man who had just given away something real and was deciding whether to regret it. She thought about her father, about the stories he chased and the silences she grew up in, about the way she had learned to hold herself at a careful distance from anything that asked too much, because people who asked too much left the biggest holes when they disappeared. She thought about a man who had put his business card on a seat between them rather than in her hand, who had stayed 3 weeks outside her building without telling her, who made eggs in the morning and sat on the floor in the dark and told her things about a grandmother in Busan. I need to go home, she said. I know, he said, and I need to think. Take the phone, he said. The encrypted one. It's yours. She looked at him. Why, she said. He met her eyes. And for a man who controlled everything, he looked, in that moment, absolutely uncertain, raw, and real in a way that was more expensive than the apartment, or the building, or anything else he owned. Because, he said, I'm not done. Amara flew back to London on a Friday. The pipes were loud. The light was excellent. Her editor sent flowers. Her neighbor knocked to ask if she was all right, having seen the news coverage. Her life resumed, familiarly, and she told herself she was fine. She was fine. She lasted 9 days before she turned on the encrypted phone. He had not messaged her. She noticed that immediately there were no messages waiting. He had given her space without being asked. She noticed that too. She typed, "Still in Seoul?" 3 seconds. "Yes. And you?" "London. The pipes are loud." A pause that she could feel even through a screen. "I have a flat in Mayfair," he wrote. Very quiet. She laughed out loud alone in her kitchen, and it surprised her. "That sounds like something someone says before a threat." His reply, "I told you the difference." "You did," she wrote. "Invitation." She stared at what she had typed. She sent it. He arrived in London on a Tuesday. No announcement. No spectacle. Just a message at 8 in the morning. "I'm in the city. Breakfast?" She met him at a place she chose, a small Ghanaian spot in Peckham, with plastic chairs and Kelwell that came with a side of hot pepper that made your eyes water. Deliberate. She wanted to see how he moved outside his environment. He ate everything without comment, asked the owner what the pepper was called, and listened to the answer with genuine interest. She watched him and decided several things she did not say out loud. They spent 3 days in the same city, not touching each other. Museums, a walk along the Thames where he listened to her talk about her father more than she had ever talked about him to anyone. A night market where he bought her a bracelet from a Ghanaian vendor without making it a gesture. Just here, you were looking at it and she wore it and did not take it off. The pull between them had stopped being something she could file away and ignore. It was constant now, ambient, the way temperature is ambient. You don't notice it until it changes. On the 3rd evening, outside the Barbican Center after a film, neither of them had entirely watched because they had spent most of it aware of the 3 inches between their shoulders. She stopped walking, and he stopped 2 steps later and turned. "Ye Hyun," she said. "Amara," he said. The city moved around them. "If I let this be something," she said carefully, "I need you to understand what I am. I go where the stories are. I don't disappear for anyone. I have a flat in Brixton and a complicated past, and I call things what they are." "I know what you are," he said. "Steady. I've been watching since the wedding. And I haven't looked away yet," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she took the 3 steps between them. Fade to black. What followed was not described for the world. It was theirs, the particular privacy of 2 people who had spent weeks in orbit, moving closer by degrees, and had finally closed the last distance. Rain on London streets. The hush of a city that did not care. 2 people who had both learned, young, that the people you love can disappear choosing, despite that, to stay. When morning came, she woke up afraid. Not of him, of herself. Of how completely, in the quiet of the night, she had lowered the careful architecture she had spent years building. She had let him in, all the way in. And in the soft morning light of her Brixton flat, with the loud pipes and the excellent light, she lay very still and listened to him breathe and thought, he will leave. That was the truth of her life, wasn't it? People she loved left, sometimes suddenly. Sometimes by disappearing into silence or distance, or the spaces that danger carved out. Her father had left. Her engagement had left. Every time she let himself want something, it found a way to go. She dressed quietly. She was at the kitchen table with her coffee when he appeared in the doorway. He took one look at her face and was still. "You're pulling away," he said. Not a question. She looked at her cup. "I think we should be clear about what this is," she said. "You live in Seoul. You run an organization I can never write about. I live here. I am exactly what I am." "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being practical." Amara, gentler. He crossed to the table and sat across from her, and she forced herself to look at him. His face was open in a way she had not seen before, unguarded, slightly undone. The careful stillness replaced by something urgent and real. "I grew up watching my father control everything and lose everything that mattered. I promised myself at 12 years old, in a house in Busan where my grandmother was reading and the TV was on. I promised myself I would never be the kind of man who could not say a true thing. So here is a true thing." He held her eyes. "I am not leaving. I have not once, since the night of that wedding, wanted to be anywhere you were not. That is for me unprecedented, terrifying, and completely beyond my control. A beat. I run empires, Amara. I am not accustomed to things being beyond my control." She stared at him. "You are," he said, "beyond my control." The pipes groaned in the walls. London traffic murmured outside. And Amara, who never begged, who never flinched, who had been keeping herself at careful distance from this particular truth for weeks, felt it break open inside her chest with an almost physical sensation, like a window thrown wide. "The truest thing she had. I know," he said. "Me too. 6 weeks later. It should have gotten easier. In some ways it did." He flew to London, twice a month. She flew to Seoul once. They built, in the space between cities and time zones, something she did not have a name for and was not in a hurry to name. Because naming things made them fragile, and she was not ready for them. He learned the Peckham spot. She learned about the private restaurant by the Han River. He stopped telling his driver her address, because she had given him a key. She stopped pretending the encrypted phone was primarily for work. Good morning became a daily constant, always in Korean from him first, always replied to, always the smallest certain proof that he was thinking of her before he thought of anything else. Danger. It was a Thursday evening in Seoul, 6 weeks after London, and Amara was in the city for a new story unrelated to the Choi case when the call came. Yi Hyun's number. His voice, which was never uncertain, stripped to something she had not heard before. "Where are you right now?" "A street in Itaewon. Coffee shop." "Leave. Now. Walk left out the door. 3rd building, black door. Code 1219. Go inside and wait." "Ye Hyun." "What?" "There's a faction from the Choi network," he said. "They've traced the full story back to you. There are 3 of them in the neighborhood. I'm 8 minutes away. Go. Now." She was already walking. She found the building, the black door, and the panel. Typed 1219. The door opened onto a stairwell that led to a second-floor room that was clearly a safe house. Minimal, functional, a window with a street view, a locked case she did not open. She sat on the single chair and waited. 8 minutes felt very long. He arrived at 7 minutes and 40 seconds. She knew, because she was counting. He came through the door already scanning eyes moving across the room, landing on her, and something in his face went immediately, visibly different. The operational tension did not leave him, but something underneath it eased in a way that told her everything she needed to know about what those 7 minutes and 40 seconds had been like for him. "You're all right," he said. "I'm all right," she confirmed. He crossed the room, and before she could say anything else, he had his hands on her face, careful, not rough, and was looking at her with an intensity that she felt in her chest. "I should have had someone with you," he said. Almost to himself, "I should have, Yehyun." She put her hands over his. "I'm fine. I walked. I coded. I sat." He exhaled. "The 3 men," she said. "Handled," he said, which she understood to mean she would not be asking for details. "They won't be a problem." "And the others? The ones who sent them?" His jaw tightened. I'm ending this tonight. He looked at her. Permanently. She searched his face. Be careful, she said. Something moved through his expression, surprise, she thought. And then something much quieter and deeper than surprise. No one tells me to be careful, he said softly. I'm telling you, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he brought his forehead down to rest against hers, just briefly, the most undone she had ever seen him, and she felt the long, controlled tension in him like a wire pulled taut, all the ways he carried weight that nobody saw. She stayed very still and let him have it. I'll be careful, he said. The week that followed was the quietest and the most complete. The Choi faction collapsed, 3 arrests, 2 voluntary confessions. The leader, a man named Chairman SIO, who had funded Tuan's operations for a decade, resigned from his board seat and disappeared to a private medical facility with what was reported as a stress-related illness. Amara did not ask what had convinced him. Yi Hyun reappeared at her hotel on a Sunday morning, unhurried, unharmed, and carrying 2 cups of coffee. It's done, he said. The version in the news, he said, is the version that went to the news. I assumed, she said. He sat down across from her and they drank their coffee, and she thought about how strange and particular it was, loving a man who moved through the world like this, vast and careful and quietly devastating, and how she had never intended to be here, and how completely she was. 1 month later, he asked her something. Not on a rooftop or in a restaurant. Not in a moment staged for effect. On a Tuesday afternoon in the living room of her Brixton flat, both of them working, the pipes going, November rain on the windows. He looked up from his laptop and said, what would it look like, realistically, if you were based in Seoul for half the year? That's a logistical question, she said. I'm asking what it would look like, he said carefully, so you can decide without pressure. She looked at him for a long moment. My work is portable, she said. I'd need my own. There's a full floor in the Mapo building, he said. Not mine, adjacent. I'd need editorial independence. You've always had it, he said. I've never once asked you to sit on a story. She looked at her hands, then back up. Why Seoul, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Because, he said slowly, Seoul is where I'm from. And he paused. Because my grandmother is buried in Busan, and I want you to see where she's buried. If you'd like. She laughed, surprised and soft, and looked at this man, this particular impossible man who had followed her from a wedding and stayed outside her building for 3 weeks and made eggs in the morning and sat on the floor in the dark, and had just asked her to meet his grandmother's grave as though it was the most natural escalation in the world. Yes to Seoul, he said. Yes to Busan first, she said. Then we'll talk about Seoul. They went on a Saturday, a 2-hour train from Seoul, through tunnels and coast, and the slow emergence of a sea that was gray and cold and enormous. Yeah, Yun sat across from her and said little, but she noticed the way the tension in him shifted as the city fell behind something relaxing that was usually held, the particular easing of a man returning to the only place he'd ever been, simply a boy. The grave was in a small cemetery on a hillside above the port. Chrysanthemums, which he had brought from a vendor at the station. Kang Suno-kei. Dal 1941 al 2020. He stood before it in silence for a long moment. Then he said something in Korean, low and private, and Amara stood a respectful distance away and looked at the gray sea below and did not intrude. When he came back to her, his eyes were clear and his jaw was set, and he looked, she thought, more like himself than she had ever seen him. She would have liked you, he said. How do you know? She said. She liked people who said true things, he said. She would have liked that you told me to be careful. Amara slid her hand into his. He held it. They stood there until the cold drove them back down the hill, 3 months later. Cold and bright and hard-edged, the kind of city that demanded you meet it fully. Amara had taken the floor in the Mapo building, her own space, her own key, her own desk that faced the river. She had been there 6 weeks. Her editor had not noticed a change in her output. Her sources had not noticed a change in her independence. Her Brixton flat was let to a postgrad student who sent photographs of the excellent light every other week. She had not noticed, until she was inside it, how much room there was in this life. One evening in February, Yi-hyun came to her floor with a bottle of wine and a look she had learned to read, not operational, not guarded. The look he wore when he had something to say and was taking his time about it. She poured the wine. "I want to ask you something," he said. "And I want to be clear that there is no pressure in any direction, and the answer, whatever it is, will not change what Yi-hyun," she said gently. He reached into the pocket of his jacket. What he placed on the table between them was not flashy. It was a ring, elegant, simple, a dark stone she did not immediately recognize set in white gold. The kind of ring chosen by someone who knew the person he was choosing for. "It's a Zambian amethyst," he said. "Your mother's country of origin, your father's birthstone month. I spoke to your mother." She waited. "You spoke to my mother," she said slowly. She waited. "In November," he said. "I wanted to ask her permission before I asked you." She said, and I'm quoting. He paused, and there was something almost soft in his expression. "Tell him, if he makes you cry, I will find him." Amara laughed, shocked and delighted, and put her hand over her mouth. "I told her I would take the risk," he said. She waited. She looked at him. This man who ran an empire and sat on floors in the dark. Who made eggs in the morning and carried chrysanthemums to grave sites. Who had put a business card on a seat between them and let her decide, and then waited patiently, fully, without performance for her to catch up. She waited. He exhaled long and quiet and deep. The exhale of a man who had been, perhaps, holding his breath in various ways for quite some time. The city stretched below the windows. The Han River ran silver in the evening dark. Somewhere in Busan, a grave was cold and the sea was endless, and an old woman who had taught her grandson to cook, and to be honest was, perhaps, satisfied. Not the kind Amara had crashed in Seoul, no 300 guests, no cathedral, no white-draped altar with a groom who went pale at the sight of an envelope. A private ceremony in a garden in Busan overlooking the sea. 40 guests, chrysanthemums everywhere, her mother in an aso oak that outshone everything else in the garden and absolutely knew it. She waited, Yi-hyun cried. Just his jaw working and his eyes going very bright while she said her vows, and she paused mid-sentence and laughed softly and reached up to touch his face. "I thought you never flinched," she said, just for him. "I don't," he said, voice unsteady in a way she had never heard. "This isn't flinching. This is the opposite of flinching." She kissed him before the officiant had finished. She waited. Nobody objected. 7 months after the wedding, Amara published the most important story of her career, a joint investigation into shell networks across 4 governments, 6 corporations, and one very powerful man in Seoul who had been funding political destabilization across 3 African nations for a decade. She did not tell Yi-hyun what the story contained, until it was already live. He read it at his desk, very still, and then came to find her. "You knew about this for 4 months," he said. "And you didn't tell me. You didn't need to know," she said simply. "And telling you would have been a conflict." He looked at her for a long moment. "One of the men named in that story is someone I've done business with." She waited. "Which is why I didn't tell you." "Are you telling me now because you want me to react?" he said carefully. "I'm telling you now because it's done," she said, "and because I don't keep things from you after the fact, only during. If you ever feel unsafe again, I'll tell you," she said. "While it's happening," he said, and the firmness in his voice made her smile. He looked at her stomach, the small, not yet visible change that only they knew about, 3 weeks into a knowledge that had rearranged everything quiet and enormous inside them both. "She can't be doing this work," he said. "She will absolutely be doing this work," Amara said. "She'll have excellent instincts and no fear." He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her from behind, careful and warm, his chin at the top of her head, both of them facing the window and the city and the river and the enormous ordinary miracle of what they had built in the space between a red dress and a business card on a back seat. "I never expected you," he said quietly. "I know," she said. "You were deciding if I was brave or foolish." She leaned back into him. "Both," she said. "I was always both." And the city went on below them. And in a garden in Busan, chrysanthemums opened toward the sea. The END thank you for watching Afro-Korean love drama. If this story moved, you share it with someone who needs to believe in this kind of love. The next story is waiting.